James IV of Scotland is probably one of the most under-acclaimed Scottish kings. He did more to unify Highland and Lowland, to raise Scotland's profile in Europe, and to improve education and to forward technology than probably just about any other Scottish king. Yet where are the monuments? At the Battle of Flodden, he was also the last Scottish king to die in battle. Or was he? If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then you can click on the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video. Oh, and also, don't forget you'll get additional information and ways to support the channel in the description below. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. This is Linlithgow Palace, and behind me is Queen Margaret's Tower. Now, COVID's restricted the numbers that can go into the palace right now, otherwise I would have taken you up to that tower to look east towards Edinburgh, as Queen Margaret did in 1513. Every day she watched and waited for her husband James, who'd crossed the border to do battle with the forces of her brother, Henry VIII. James never returned from that battle, but neither did his body. Now, next door to Linlithgow Palace is St Michael's Chapel, and shortly before he headed south to invade England, James had been here in the chapel at prayer, seeking God's blessing and protection. And at the chapel door appeared a long-haired old man with a beard down to his waist and a staff in his hand and a sapphire blue robe. He moved amongst the nobles gathered, then approached James, wailing, saying, "My mother sent me, asking me to tell you not to pass to where you go. Your journey will not fare well for you or those who accompany you." And then before the king could respond, the wisp-like figure had disappeared. So why was he going in the first place? Here's a quick summary of what we know. Scotland had been allies with France since the time of William Wallace. James had sought to build bridges with England as well. That's why he'd married Margaret Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII. You can find out more in my video, The Marriage of the Thistle and the Rose. But since 1502, there had been a treaty of perpetual peace with England and an old alliance with France. The problem was Henry VIII had invaded France. Awkward. So what side are you on? Let's spice the game up a bit with some raised stakes. Imagine that you're a devout Catholic, like James, and the papacy is in a dispute with France. So the Pope says that if you invade England, as required by your 200-year-old treaty, you'll be excommunicated. It's the devil in the deep blue English Channel, isn't it? Now, we all know that James invades. We all know that it culminates in what's known as the Battle of Flodden, the worst military disaster in Scotland's history. James had famously told a Spanish ambassador that his subjects serve him with their persons and goods in just and unjust quarrels exactly as he likes, and therefore he does not think that he has the right to begin any warlike undertaking without himself being the first in danger. Just like American presidents then, eh? So instead of marshalling his forces from the rear of the battle, he's in the front line with his troops. He's dismounted and he's fighting shoulder to shoulder with his men in a way that his rival Henry VIII would never do. In the thick of battle, some of his nobles want him to protect himself, maybe even to flee for safety. But if you've watched my video about how James came to the throne, then you'll know that James became king because he'd allowed himself to be figurehead of a rebellion against his father, James III. And his dad had been ignominiously killed fleeing the Battle of Sochieburn. If you're going to die, you might as well die with your boots on. Actually, because it was so muddy downhill, some of the Scots apparently took their boots off. That's another day. The point is that James III had been killed fleeing from the forces of James IV. And that's why all his life from that point, James IV wore a heavy iron chain around his waist as a penance for the sin of patricidal regicide. You can watch my playlist on James IV at the end of this video. Come on. Let me tell you about another two characters. Lord Holm was a Scottish border nobleman. Lord Dacre was his equivalent on the English side of the border. Their two forces were directly opposite each other at the battle. Now, borderers of either side had a reputation for fighting bitterly against each other week to week, but going easy on each other whenever there was a battle between Scotland and England. It's like when somebody insults your annoying cousin. That tosspot's family, isn't he? In the midst of battle, the Earl of Huntly shouts to Holm, "The king's in trouble, let's go and help." Holm says, "I'll take care of me, he can take care of him." It turns out that Holm was one of the only Scottish nobles that survived that battle. Not only that, Dacre, his English counterpart, was accused of the same lack of commitment on the English side too. Double I think. After a crushing defeat for the Scots, there was some initial confusion about the fate of James IV. As the English went through the battlefield robbing the dead, reports were sent to Henry in France to say that James was alive, others that he was dead. After the battle, it was said that James had been seen walking hale and hearty near Kelso. James was seen crossing the River Tweed on the evening of the battle, but was then murdered by Holm. 4 horsemen were seen crossing the battlefield carrying spears with a wisp at the point. They headed to where James was, lifted him to horse and galloped off towards Scotland. The next day, Dacre, the dodgy English borderer, who was under a bit of PR pressure after his performance, turned up at Berwick with James's body. 2 Scots under Dacre's control identified it as the body of James. Now, other items were found as well, like his dagger, his banner, his riding harness. And so the body was embalmed, cased in lead and taken to York. Now, why across land rather than a much easier sea route from Berwick to London? I don't know. From York, it was taken to the monastery at Sheen, Richmond and Surrey. But then there was a problem. What do you do with a body? You see, James had been excommunicated the moment they invaded England. He couldn't be buried on holy ground. So Henry VIII wrote to the Pope asking permission to have his brother-in-law interred at St Paul's Cathedral. Now, the Pope lifts the excommunication. It was political in the first place, on the basis that he probably made a deathbed repentance. What? The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse came and collected him personally. We thought it was you that sent them. Anyway, there's a wee bit of plague in London, because that's how karma works. So James's body gets forgotten about. It lies there in Richmond, and the next time that we hear about it is 40 years later. The property had been owned by the Earl of Hertford, but he'd been executed, and a guy came to look over the property, and he found a coffin in the woodpile, minus the head that some workmen had locked off to play football. Now, you might reasonably be asking, is that the way to treat the mortal remains of a monarch? The question I'm asking is, where's the iron belt? This body of James was examined by 2 Scots whose future depended on keeping Lord Dacre of the English Marches happy, remember. They confirmed that the body was that of James, a man who since the age of 15 had worn an iron belt around his waist as penance. Where was the belt? There was no belt. Oh, maybe the battlefield corpse robbers took the belt. Maybe they did. Maybe they took an iron belt but left an ornate royal dagger, a royal banner and a royal riding harness of a king who dismounted and left his horse to fight on foot. Was this really the corpse of James IV? If it wasn't, then where was he? Was he killed in the battlefield? Was he seen in Kelso hale and hearty? Was he taken and murdered by Holm, who wanted to avoid retribution for leaving his king? Or was he lifted and taken into the distance by 4 ethereal horsemen? Is he still in the spirit world, waiting like a latter-day King Arthur for Scotland to call in our time of need? I think I'll go up to the tower and see if he's coming, eh? Whilst I do that, can you give this video the thumbs up and share it? I mean, Doc is going to be Lama alive. Cheery and Rasta.